Okay, so we're holding Daf Gimel Amud Daled Amud Aleph. Today's Amud is Daf Daled Amud Base, but we're still up to Daf Daled Amud Aleph. The Mishnah is a new Mishnah, not connected to the previous Sugya, which was dealing with Mikvayis. We're going to a new Mishnah, and it's a new start. So says the Mishnah. Mishnah says, "Me'idin anu ish ploini shechayv lechaveru matzayim zos v'nimtzu zaymin loikinu mishalmin." Two Adam come along and they say that ploini is chayav matzayim zos. So it's a regular case where they're being mechayev ploini, they're being mechayev Reuven money. They're saying that he owes 200 zos to somebody. So they found zaymin. So pashtos kasha zama. If the Adam are found to be Zaymin, which is the discussion, what we're discussing the whole time, the Adam are found to be Adam Zaymin with the Manu Hayis, and two other Adam come along and say you can't say that Reuven owes 200 zuz to Shimon. Reuven borrowed money from Shimon on Tuesday afternoon. You were with us on Tuesday afternoon. So in such a situation, Kasha Zaman, the Adam should be chayav 200 zuz. Says here the Mishnah records says the opinion of Remeah. That not only are they chayav money, loikinu mishalmin, they also get Makkos. So what's the reason why they get Makkos? Shaloi Hashem amaviuni de Makkos maviuni de tishlamim. Remeah says that the reason why they get Makkos is because. Just 1 second, sorry. The reason why they get Makkos as well is because there's two chiyuvim over here. There's a chiyuv of loisana. And there's also there's a lab of loisana, you're not allowed to testify falsely. And there's also kasha zaman. There's two things, and it's two different psukim. One is a pasuk kasha zaman, another pasuk is loisana. They're not next to each other. It's not the same pasuk which brings to Makkos, which brings to the tashlumin, and therefore there's two chiyurim. That's the shit of Remeah. Chacham say no. So the general rule, kol mashalim ein loike. At least by Adam Zaymin, whenever or anytime really, that whenever somebody is chayav money, so then he doesn't get there's no chiyuv Makkos. So we have to just introduce over here that it's something new. And up until now, we understood that the Makkos is in unique cases. The only time you get Makkos in the first Mishnah is Eidei ben Grusha, ben Chalutza, Eidei Golus. You don't get the kasha zaman because the pasuk lazaro hu yonos alakazar, the different sukkim which are memayet, which exclude the Adam from getting the regular kasha zaman. So then they get Makkos, as we saw in base on the base. It's likus asad v'shir sarasha that pasuk tells me. Then in a situation where there's no kasha zaman, so then there is Makkos. But when there is kasha zaman, before there's no Makkos. That's been how we've been working till now. And moreover, the issue with loisana, it's a lab shem by ma'isa. So Leisan is allowed shem b'mais, b'chol lav shem b'mais ein loiknol. So this is a shit of Remeah. That's what you have to understand. Remeah, this is the first time we're seeing Remeah's shit is that you can actually get Makkos for Leisana, and the Pashtos. The reason is because although regularly lav shem b'mais is ein loiknol, but the hitznikus atzadik on which we saw in the base on the base is megala Leisana is different. Right. So, and the Mishnah, up until now, we were working with the premise that only where there's no kasha zaman you get Makkos, because that's taka the shit of the Chachamim. But Remeah holds that you get both, right? So that's the first discussion of the Mishnah, where there's both, where there's somebody, two Adam come and chayiv somebody money, so you chayiv kasha zaman. According to Remeah, to pay the money, kasha zaman, to pay the 200 zuz. And according to Remeah, also Makkos, because Leisana Brech Eid Shaka, the 9th commandment in Aseret Adibris, is he not allowed to testify falsely. Every Eid Zayim is also testifying falsely. So therefore, there's Makkos as well. Why do you get two punishments? So Remeah explains, it's not the same pasuk. If it was the same pasuk, so then you don't give two punishments. But because it's two different psukim, one is Kasha Zaman, one is Leisana, so there's no issue. And you get both punishments. Chacham say no. See, Rashi will explain a little bit more. Says the second discussion in the Mishnah. Second discussion in the Mishnah is a similar sort of discussion, meaning where there's two punishments, one because of kasha zam and one because of loisana. But different to the beginning of the Mishnah, the first half of the Mishnah, where the kasha zamam, what they tried to get the nidoin to be chayav, the defendant to be chayav, was money. In this situation, what they tried to get the Nidin to be chayav was Malkus. For example, two Aiden come along and say that someone ate chaylev. Someone did some sort of lab which is chayav Malkus. So over here, what do? You get one set of Malkus because of Kashazam, or you also get a second set of Malkus because of Leisana. And here too, there's a Machlokes which mirrors the first Machlokes. I'm showing him discuss why you need both discussions, but and they explain the difference. We're not going to go into that right now. But the Maisa, it mirrors the same. It's the same idea. That according to Meir, you get one punishment. Sorry, you get two punishments: one for Kashazam, one for Leisana. Just like in first half of the mission, according to Chachamim, you just get one punishment of Kashazam. Let's see inside. Second half of the Mishnah, two can come along and say the Klein is chayav Malkus Abar, Klein he was over and allowed in the Torah, and therefore he's chayav Malkus. The Nimtzu Zaymin, and they found Zaymin those Eidim. Loikin Shmoina says Remeah, they get two sets of Malkus. Mishum Leisana Brecha, Shaka Mishum Asisim Lekashazam. One because of Leisana, and the other because of Kashazam. Divrei Remeah. Chacham say Ein Loikin Elo Arboim. And the Gemara is going to explain one. So let's see. Right. So those are the two machlokes in the Mishnah. That again, it's the same sort of kav. Rameir says you get kashazama, whatever the kashazama is, that's one punishment. And then there's a second, there's a malchus because of leisana. Leisana is lav shem b'mais. We have to deal with it. But one way of explaining it is pashat because of the its equals megala that the leisana is an exception, and since it's two different psukim, kashazama and leisana, so then there's two different punishments. And then again, where it's not money, the kashazam, but the kashazam is malchus. The second half of the Mishnah, we have a similar machlokes. Rameir said you get two sets of malchus, one for kashazam and one for leisana. And the Chacham say no, you only get punished for kashazam, you only get one set of malchus. Let's see Rashi. It's not the Shaloi Hashem. It's not the same name. It's not the same reason where you chayav malchus, chayav tashlum, and therefore you can be chayav both. Malchus mishum leisana, says Rashi. Malchus is because of leisana brecha shakar. You're not allowed to testify falsely. The tashlum mishum kashazam. The tashlum is because of kashazam, because it's two different chiyuvim, so therefore you can get two different punishments. Hashem hamikra. Hashem means the pasuk. It's a different pasuk. The Chacham say no. Kol mishalim ein loikin. Says Rashi. The chesiv kidei rishasai. So Rashi is basically saying what the Gemara is going to say. See in the Gemara inside, but Rashi says. Explains the reason for the Chachamim, why I call him a Shalim in Eloike. The Chassid says in Pasuk Kidei Rishasai, says in the Pasuk Kidei Rishasai, that you get punished according to your wickedness, according to your rishus. Mishum Risha Achas Atem Mechayiv V'Yatem Mechayiv Mishum Shtei Rishayos. You get punished for one Risha, but not for two. In other words, whenever you're getting punished for something, you can only be chayav one punishment, even if there's two core punishments. You did one act, so you don't get two punishments. Or Maseches Ksubas Makshino v'neima kol aloikein mishalim. The Gemara in Ksubas elaborates a little more than it does over here and asks the kasha. Okay, you're telling me Kidei Rishasai, the Kidei Rishasai, you get punished according to your wickedness. Tells me only for one. You only get one. Well, why are we deciding that you pay the money and not the malchus? There's loisan over here. You've testified falsely. And there's kashazam. And why choose the malchus? Why choose the tashlumin over the malchus according to the Chacham? So the Gemara in Ksubas addresses this question. The name of kol aloikein mishalim. Let us say that anybody who's loike is ein mishalim. The yoku kol azoymin lo yishalmu. Right? You do it the other way around. You get malchus and not mammon. True, the Chacham is saying you only get one because of Kidei Rishasai, but why dafka the mammon and not the malchus? So the Gemara answers, Mashnina, the Gemara Ksubas answers, the Feirush Ripsa Torah Eidim Zaymin Hashem and the Yalif Lahas. The Gemara learns out over there that it's dafka tashlumin. It's a pasuk in Eidim Zaymin, which implies dafka mammon, right? Because the word Rasha implies mammon, as we'll see in Ksubas. Okay, so that's looking at Gemara Ksubas for more information. Ein loikin el arba. Now going to the second discussion in the Mishnah, says Rashi, why do you only get 40 malchus even though there's loisana plus there's the kashazam? You tried to get the Eidim you tried to get the Nidon to be punished with malchus. Ein loikin el arba mishum kashazam, and because of kashazam, and mishum loisana loilaki kivin farash. Loisana you don't get malchus, as is explained in the Gemara. Okay, let's see the Gemara. So that's the Mishnah, two cases. And we first deal with the first half of the Mishnah. Gemara first deals with the first half of the Mishnah, which is a case where the Eidim tried to be Mechayiv Mamon. So there's a punishment of Kashazam and Mamon. And Rameir says there's also a punishment of Malchus because of your Oivan Loisana. And the Chacham argues. So what's the Gemara is going to explain what's the reasoning of Rameir and the Chacham. Rashi's already explained, but let's see inside the Gemara how the Gemara spells it out. So the Gemara, Friday Gemara, Bishleim the Rabbanon. It's understandable according to the Rabbanon why they say Kol HaMishalem like you only get one punishment, the punishment of Kasha Zaman, of Mamain, but not the Malkas. Kedei Rishasik. It says in the pasuk Kedei Rishasik. Right? The Hayim bin Akois Rashi Pila Shav Bikol Fana Kedei Rishasik in Miskra. With regards to Malkas, it says over the Kedei Rishasik. So we learn over there, we learn from that pasuk, Mishum Risha Achas Atam Mechayv V'Yatam Mechayv Mishum Shtei Rishayis. That whenever you be Mechayv someone a punishment, you'll Mechayv him because of one Risha. If you did two Averis and one, two, right? So you don't give two punishments. And therefore, why money and not Malkus? That the Gemara in Kesubos explains. But Akopanim, that's the explanation of the Shitta of the Rabbana. Says the Gemara, Bishleim the Rabbana. The Rabbana is understood. El Rameya, my time. What's Rameya's reason why you give him two punishments? What does he do with Kedei Rishaseh? Kedei Rishaseh implies otherwise. So the Gemara's explanation essentially is that the Be'etzem, the way I understand it at least, I haven't looked into it too much, but the Be'etzem Rameh agrees with Kedei Rishaseh that you can only get one punishment for one act, even though there's two different issues over here. There's Kasha Zam and there's Lo Sana. And even though earlier Rameh in the Mishnah explains his reason, Lo Yashem, but still, what about Kedei Rishaseh? Kedei Rishaseh tells me that you should only get one punishment. So his answer is that Edom Zoimim is different essentially. Why is Edom Zoimim an exception? My timer. So Ola explains the reason. Goma mi Moitzi Shemra. He learns from Moitzi Shemra. Binyan Av. Binyan Av. This is what you call a Binyan Av. A Binyan Av means when we find in the Torah a din by a certain case, certain situation. So Binyan Av tells me that we apply that to any other situation which is similar. So what was Pshat? Over here we see by Moitzi Shemra, which is a case of a man who falsely accuses his wife of being Mizana between Erusin and Nisuin, at least according to some shittas, I think, yeah. A man accuses his wife of being Mizana Tachtov, right? Between Erusin and Nisuin. Yeah, between Erusin and Nisuin, that's Takab Shat, yeah. Lo Matzasi Levit for Psulim, the pasuk said, Rashi, Moitzi Shemra, Lo Matzasi Levit for Psulim. So over there, Moitzi Shemra, the Farish gets Malkus and Mammon. We see you get two punishments. So we learn from there that Edom Zoimim is the same. That's the inside. Just like a Moitzi Shemra. The pasuk is the Farish says that you get both Malkus and you have to pay money. You pay knas to the father of the daughter of the wife, father of the wife, and you also get Malkus. I think it's worthwhile interrupting to do Rashi over there because Taka, where do you see by Moitzi Shemra? Moitzi Shemra gets Malkus and Mom. The pasuk just says the Von Choice and Me'er Chesed. There's a knas of Me'er Chesed. Where's the Malkus? So Rashi explains loiko mishalem. Tichsev the Yisroel v'anchois. It says in the pasuk two things: the Yisroel, you inflict him, you pain him; v'anchois, and you punish him. And the Gemara explains it. The Yisroel is a Malkus. The Apina Lomikra. We learn out of psukim that Yisroel, inflicting pain, refers to Malkus, and we learn out of psukim the anchois of Me'er Chesed is as it says. It's Mammon. So the Yisroel says Malkus v'anchois of Me'er Chesed. So we see from here the Moitzi Shemra from the pasuk Yisroel of anchois. We see the Moitzi Shemra has the Malkus and Mammon. Despite him doing one act, he gets two punishments. So we learn from there, any other situation where there's a reason to be mechayiv somebody with Malkus and Mammon, we don't say Kedei Rishasai. Rather we say that you get both. That's what we learn on Moitzi Shemra. At this point, it would seem like any loiko mishalem is taka. Any loiko mishalem is going to be get both. But let's see the hemshch in the Gemara, because the Gemara straight away asks the kasha, "Mala Moitzi Shemra shekein knas." Can't learn from Moitzi Shemra. You're learning from a binyan av. But a binyan av work. The way binyan av works means that the Torah in one place tells me a certain thing, so we apply it to whoever else makes sense. In other words, to whoever any other situation which is similar. You can only compare it to another situation which is similar. But if the binyan av, if the place where the Torah in the first place says that it is unique in a certain way, right? There's a certain chumrah, there's a certain chidush involved in it, then you can't apply it to other cases, because one could argue that the reason why Moitzi Shemra has loiko mishalem is because it has this special quality. What's the special quality? So the Gemara explains, Mal Moitzi Shemra shekein knas. Moitzi Shemra is a knas, right? The damage isn't me'er chesed, right? The damage is probably either more or less. It's not something you can necessarily quantify, being Moitzi Shemra somebody, but we say Yichai 100, it's a knas. And if it's a knas, there's a rule, knossos have their own rules, and you can't learn mammon from knas. And if so, how can you learn other cases from Moitzi Shemra? That's Gemara's question. How can you learn Eidim Zoymin from Moitzi Shemra? So the Gemara straight away answers, not an issue. Why not? Ramea holds like Rabbi Kibu says that Eidim Zoymin is also knas. In other words, what are we left with? So that's the end of this Gemara. What are we left with over here? The Chachamim say because it says in Pasuk today Rishasai, you punish someone for his rishos, one risha and not two. And Rameh says that I would agree in principle, but I learned from Moitzi Shemer that any situation which is similar to Moitzi Shemer, right, which means any case which is knas and is loy komasham, there's a reason to be mechayev malchus. Like in this case by Eidim Zoyim, there's a reason to be mechayev malchus because of loisan, and the reason to be mechayev mammon because of kasher zaman, because they tried to get the guy the nidin to pay 200 zuz. So in such a situation, you need to pay both. You need to not pay, but you need to punishment. You get punished with both. The person will get punished with both. So, Moitzi Shemra is knas. Well, Eidim Zoyim is also knas. So there's no issue of learning one from the other. That is the biur, the explanation of the reasoning of Rameh and the Rabbanon about the first half of the Mishnah. Let's see Rashi. Right, the third Rashi on the page as well. Don't learn from Moitzi Shemra because it's a knas. Says Rashi, the whole knas chidushu. The whole concept of knas, explains Rashi, is a chiddush. It doesn't make sense because mammon makes sense. You cause someone damage, pay that exact damage. But knas, like this fixed amount, which the Torah says, which don't match and don't align with how much you actually damage. That's a chiddush. It's a novelty. It's not something which is logical. It's something that the Torah was mechadish, and therefore, if we find other dinim by Moitzi Shemra that's loy komashal, you can't apply it to other cases. And in other cases, we should stick with the regular rule of kedei rishasai, that you can only get punished one punishment. So that's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara answers taka that Eidim Zoyim is also knas. You can learn knas from knas. Okay. Now the Gemara really goes into a different topic. But because so how does the different topic come in? Because Ola said a statement over. Ola said in the explanation of the Shitta Ramea, in the piece of the Gemara we just learned, Ola said that we learn from Moitzi Shemra. We learn something from Moitzi Shemra. Just like Moitzi Shemra is loy komeshalem, so too, just like Moitzi Shemra is loy komeshalem, so too, the situation is the same by Eidim Zoyim. So now we have a different version in the Gemara whereby all the statement that we learn something from Moitzi Shemra isn't the cloud talking about our sugya. All the statement that we learned something from Moitzi Shemra wasn't talking about learning Eidim Zoyim from Moitzi Shemra and the explanation of our Mishnah. We're talking about a different topic, Legamri. Let's see inside. There are some people who say no, all the statement wasn't about Eidim Zoyim, but rather all the statement that we learned from Moitzi Shemra was talking about a different discussion. What discussion? The time you learned in the Brayso. For the moment, let's just learn the Brayso as an independent thing. And you learned the Brayso. The pasuk says, with regards to Noisa, that you're not allowed to leave over Karbanas till the morning. And if you do leave it over, then there's a mitzvah, there's a positive commandment to burn it. So the Gemara explains, the pasuk is coming to give an assay after the lois assay to say that you don't get malchus. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Here we have the opinion of Lav Hanitik Lasay, that whenever the Torah says you're not allowed to do something, and then the Torah says, you know what, if you are over, you can fix it up in a certain way, so then there's no malchus. So just like over here, pasuk says don't leave over the carb until the morning to eat it before the morning. But then the pasuk continues by saying that if you do leave it over, then you have to burn it. So even though usually there's a general rule, a lav, or Torah says don't do something and you do it, you get malchus. Here's an exception because the Torah is saying don't do it, and if you do it, there's a way of fixing it up. There's a way of being mechaper other than malchus by doing the assay, by going and burning the. You have a similar thing by gzeila, at least according to most shittas. Not exactly in the sugya, but gzeila is one of the examples. Loy sigs you're not allowed to steal. The heishav is gzeila shagaz. The pasuk the heishav is gzeila shagaz. You fix it up by returning the stolen object. So therefore, there's taka no malchus for stealing, even though it's a lav in the Torah. And lav normally get malchus because it's a lav anitik lasei. It's a lav which is fixed up by nasei. So there's no malchus. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda why noisar doesn't get malchus. So Rabbi Kiva argues. Rabbi Kiva oimer loy min hashem uzeh. No, this is not the reason why Noisar, leaving over Karbanis till the morning, doesn't get malchus. It's a different reason. Loimin Hashem is not for this reason. Elo mishum dehavali lav she'ein bo ma'isa. A different reason. Noisar, you're not doing anything by leaving it over. You're just not eating it. You're just sitting passively on your couch and right, not doing anything. So it's a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. V'chol lav she'ein bo ma'isa ein loikin. That's what the Gemara says. So we'll see in Rashi, but Pashtos, I mean, I think there's different ways of learning it. Either Rabbi Kiva holds a lav and nitik says taka loikin. You could learn differently as well. I think it's totally different gersais in Rashi, but there's another way of learning which Rabbi Kiva is agreeing that lav and nitik say you don't get malchus. He's just saying that in this case of noisa, that's not the reason. You don't need that reason. Even without that reason, it's a lav shein by ma'isa and the whole lav shein by ma'isa. So here we have a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Yehuda says that the reason for noisa are not getting malchus, the lav and nitik say, it's a lav which the Torah then says don't do something but fix it up by doing kach v'kach. Rabbi Kiva says it's because it's a lav shein by ma'isa. There's no action involved in transgressing the lav. So says the Gemara, continues the Gemara, Michlal, we can from this machlokes, we can infer the Rabbi Yehuda saw a lav shein by ma'isa loiknala. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda had to get to the reason of lav and nitik basei must be because he held that lav shein by ma'isa does get malchus. In this taka we know that Rabbi Yehuda is the Bala Memra. He holds that lav shein by ma'isa loiknala. Lav shein by ma'isa you are loik. Halacha follows the Chachamim that lav shein by ma'isa ain't loiknala. You don't get malchus, but Rabbi Yehuda holds lav shein by ma'isa. That's the end of the brayso. So now the Gemara asks Minole, where taka do we know? What's taka the reason and the mocker for Rabbi Yehuda who says that lav shein by ma'isa is loikin? Now I'm not sure. Just notice this question now. Why you need a pasuk? Before it's the other way around. Every lav is. I'm leaving this open question. Every lav is the general rule is that a lav gets malchus. So before you need a pasuk, there's probably a mocker. The lav shein by ma'isa ain't loikin. Do we need a mocker the other way around? That lav shein by ma'isa is yaloika. So I don't know exactly the cheshbon. In other words, the background. So, but Akopanim, the Gemara over here is explaining the reason for Rabbi Yehuda why lav shein by ma'isa is yaloikin, and says this is where Ola came in. This is where Gomar Moitzi Shamra. All the statement that we learned something from Moitzi Shamra wasn't referring to Adam Zayimim. It was to explain the shit of Rabbi Yehuda that lav shein by ma'isa loikin. Ola Gomar Moitzi Shamra. We learn it from Moitzi Shamra. What do we learn from Moitzi Shamra? Moitzi Shamra, by definition, is lav shein by ma'isa. The guy is just speaking. He's making up a story about his wife. He's lying, saying that she was Mazana when she wasn't. So, nevertheless, there's malchus, like we saw earlier. Rashi explains the Yisroel, the onchoy, so the part of Yisroel tells me there's malchus. So I'm all a gama Moitzi Shamra. Ma Moitzi Shamra lav shein by ma'isa loikin. I'll call lav shein by ma'isa loikin. We learn from Moitzi Shamra. Just like a Moitzi Shamra is mefurish that there's malchus, despite the fact it's a lav shein by ma'isa loikin. So we learn from that. Binyanav. Any situation which is similar to Moitzi Shamra is the same thing. In other words, whatever argument you tell me why lav shein by ma'isa shouldn't get malchus, Moitzi Shamra teaches me otherwise. Moitzi Shamra is a binyav teaches me. Moitzi Shamra is an example of a case where, despite the fact it's a lav shein by ma'isa, there's malchus. So we can apply it to any other case of lav shein by ma'isa. So the Gemara straight away asks, based on the general idea that we already laid forth earlier, that the only time we say binyav, the only time we say that if you find something that the Torah says applicable to one case, apply it to other cases, only if those other cases can be compared to that first case. But if the first case itself is unique in a certain way, there's other chumras that we find. So then one could argue that the reason why Moitzi Shamra is an exception to the rule that is lav shein by ma'isa loikin is because there's other things Moitzi Shamra is an exception to the rule. There's other chumras, there's other stringencies about Moitzi Shamra, which teaches me that Moitzi Shamra is unique and you can't learn from Moitzi Shamra to other cases. Let's see inside. Says the Gemara, Mala Moitzi Shamra shekem loikin mashal. Moitzi Shamra is an exception in another way. You get malchus and moment despite usually not being loikin mashal. Normally you don't get two punishments. Moitzi Shamra gets two punishments. So therefore the fact that you get malchus as well might also be due to its exceptional character, due to some sort of character that Moitzi Shamra has that makes it different, as we see that it's different in other ways. It's loikum mishalim, despite usually there being a rule of Klei Rishasi that you only get one punishment. So says the Gemara, Ela Amri Shlakish. Shlakish says no. You don't learn it from Moitzi Shamra, but rather Gomer mi Adam Zaymer, meaning learn what? Let's just recap. We're talking about trying to find a reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds a lav shein by ma'isa gets malchus. So says Rishlakish Taki, you can't learn it from Moitzi Shamra alone. I should add, we'll soon see the Gemara's Maskana is going to learn it from both Moitzi Shamra and Adam Zaymer. But at this point, we're saying you can't learn it from Moitzi Shamra. because Moitzi Shemra is like a Mishalim, Moitzi Shemra is a Chiddush in other ways. Elo, Amrish Lakish, Gomer mi Eidim Zayim. Learn it from Eidim Zayim. Learn every Lav Shem B'Maisa they should get Malchus from the case of Eidim Zayim. Which case of Eidim Zayim Rashi explains, hopefully we'll see inside soon, that the case of Eidim Zayim, meaning the Eidei Ben Gerusha, which L'Kula Alma, even according to the Chachamim, or Eidei Golos for that matter. Yeah, the Mishnah is Mefurish, that in those two instances, they get Malchus, despite the fact it's a Lav Shem B'Maisa, because they just spoke. So says Rish Lakish, Gomer Eidim Zayim, we learn every single Lav Shem B'Maisa from Eidim Zayim. Ma Eidim Zayim, how does it work? Ma Eidim Zayim, Lav Shem B'Maisa, like in Allah. Just as we see by Eidim Zayim, the Eidim Zayim is a lav which there's no action involved because you're just speaking and nevertheless there's Malchus. I've called Lav Shem B'Maisa like in Allah. Learn, apply to every single Lav Shem B'Maisa that you get Malchus. Okay, so far so good. You might ask, no, you can't say that. Mal Eidim Zayim in Srichin Hasra. Eidim Zayim has other unique dinim which are very different than regular, and therefore the fact that we see something else weird or strange or unique, shall we say, Chiddush by Eidim Zayim, shouldn't be able to teach me about anything else. What's the Chiddush by Eidim Zayim? There's no Hasra for Eidim Zayim. The Gemara in Ksubas explains why not, but it's clear that there's no Hasra. Eidim Zayim come. In other words, they testify and we think they're saying the truth. Then two other Eidim Zayim come and say, but there was no Hasra on the first Eidim Zayim that we tell them, if you're found falsely later, you should know that you're going to get Kashazam. You're going to get Malchus in this case. You're going to get punished. Kashazam. So since there's a Chiddush by Eidim Zayim, ain't Tzrichin Hasra, so therefore you can't learn it to any other case. So here we have a situation where the Gemara is going to continue, and this is a general principle we learn. Binyan Avod, you learn one thing from another, but even if you can't learn it from one thing alone, because that one thing has a certain chumrah which teaches me that you can't learn from it, like in this case where you can't learn from Moitzi Shemra because Moitzi Shemra is loikum mashal. You can't learn from Eidim Zayim because Eidim Zayim is a special chiddush that ain't Tzrichin Hasra, so it teaches me that Eidim Zayim has something unique about it, and it has certain chumras which maybe therefore we can't apply the rules that we find by Eidim Zayim to other cases. But the combination of the two, we can learn from both, because each one proves to me, since each one has a different chumrah than the other, each one proves to me that it's not the chumrah which causes it to have this din. In other words, let's see inside, and I'll try and explain it a little bit in a moment. You've asked me a kasha mal Eidim Zayim, so you can't learn from Eidim Zayim because ain't Tzrichin Hasra, but Moitzi Shemra Yechiach. In other words, the reason why Eidim Zayim gets Malchus, despite the fact that it's Lav Shem B'Maisa, it can't be because of some chumrah that it has, which leads to it not needing Hasra, Eidim Zayim, because Moitzi Shemra Yechiach. Moitzi Shemra does need Hasra, and nevertheless, it's a Lav Shem B'Maisa, it's a Lav Shem B'Maisa, and you get Malchus. So Moitzi Shemra proves to me that the reason by Eidim Zayim cannot be because of Ein Tzrichin Hasra, because Moitzi Shemra does need Hasra, and nevertheless, is Chayev Malchus despite it being a Lav Shem B'Maisa. The Chazer Adin. So then we say Chazer Adin means the din goes back, meaning that we but just a second, Moitzi Shemra is loikum mishalim. Maybe that's the reason, right? Moitzi Shemra. So we say, okay, just a second, but the Eidim Zayim isn't loikum mishalim. So loyri izakir izav, loyri izakir izav, meaning each chumrah looks different than the other. Loyri izakir izav, Moitzi Shemra doesn't look like Eidim Zayim, but loyri izakir izav, and Eidim Zayim doesn't look like Moitzi Shemra. Each one has its own chumrah, and the chumras can't be that which is goyrem, the din that you get Malchus despite it being a Lav Shem B'Maisa, because each one has a different chumrah. So how do we proceed? We proceed by looking at the Sada Shava. We can learn it from both together. What do Moitzi Shemra and Eidim Zayim share? At Sada Shava Shava and Lav Shem B'Maisa. The Sada Shava, the common denominator between Moitzi Shemra and Eidim Zayim is that it's a Lav Shem B'Maisa. The loikin Allah. And you get Malchus for it. Therefore, we can apply it to every Lav Shem B'Maisa. So in summary, what are we saying over here? We're saying that Eidim Zayim and Moitzi Shemra together teach me that Lav Shem B'Maisa like another. According to Yehuda. Yehuda says Lav Shem B'Maisa like another. And what's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? So says Ola, we learn from Moitzi Shemra, but it's like a little amendment over here. It's not straight from Moitzi Shemra. It's not straight from Moitzi Shemra. It's a combination of Moitzi Shemra and Eidim Zayim. We learn from the combination of both of them. You can't learn it from each one alone because each one has a special chumrah, which might be the reason why it gets malchus despite it being an lav shein b'maisa. But because we can learn it from both of them, because both of them, each one has a different chumrah. It can't be that the chumrah of ein srichin hasra is what causes lav shein b'maisa to get malchus, because moitzi shemra proves to me that despite needing hasra, still gets malchus. And same thing the other way around. The fact that moitzi shemra is loika mishalim can't be the reason why it's malchus despite it being lav shein b'maisa, because edim zayim yechia, which doesn't have that chumrah of loikin and mishalim. Again, this is working point to the chachamim of Rabbi in the Mishnah, that you never get malchus a moment. So that's where we're holding. Now the Gemara further asks a question. Just a second. The mal atzad hashava shebahen, on the fourth line of the 5 lines. Mal atzad hashava shebahen shekein knas. L'chura, true moitzi sham and edim zayimim have different chumras, but they each have the same chumrah that the knas. Both edim zayimim and moitzi sham are knas, as we mentioned earlier. Right? We saw in the Mishnah, Rabbi Kiva says, "Edim mishalem al piyatzma." In the Brisa, sorry, in the Gimel, "Edim mishalem al piyatzma." The Edim Zayim don't pay by their own admission. The Gemara explains because it's a knas. So both Edim Zayim and Moitzi Shemra is knas. You can't learn Mammon from knas. Knas is a chiddush, and therefore, just because Moitzi Shemra and Edim Zayim are both examples of lav shein by Maisa, where you get malchus, you can't learn to other lav shein by Maisa. You can't learn to Noisar. You can't learn to other lav shein by Maisa. Sorry, yeah, you can't learn to not nicer. You can't learn to other, any other lav shein b'maisa. You can't learn to other lav shein b'maisa that loikin olav, because it's knas. So you can only leave it to the domain of knas. Any case where it's not knas, you can't learn. So the Gemara answers, essentially the premise is right. Yeah, that if were it to be knas, were both moitzi sham and edim zayim to be knas, then you wouldn't be able to learn from them. Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't be able to learn from them that lav shein b'maisa is loikin olav. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that edim zayim is knas. Sure, we saw earlier Edim Zayim is knas. That's Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold Rabbi Kiva. Haloi kasha says, that's not a kasha. Rabbi Yehuda loy sava like Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Yehuda tak holds the Edim Zayim is mammon. So in this situation, we have a situation where the Edim Zayim is mammon. True moitzi shamra is knas, but ultimately we see that both Edim Zayim and moitzi shamra are cases of a lav shein by Maisa. They're both situations where lav shein by Maisa gets malchus. So we can learn from there that every lav shein by Maisa gets malchus. Our moitzi shamra is knas, but Edim Zayim isn't. So we can learn to all situations of lav shein b'maisa. The lav shein b'maisa gets malchus. Now the Gemara asks an interesting question, and after this we'll do some Rashi. Right, the Gemara, I say it's an interesting question because I'll preface, because really what the Gemara's question, at least the way Rashi explains this question, goes against the whole idea of tzad hashava, of binyan av, when you learn from two things together. The whole idea of the Gemara is going to ask that, just a second, both moitzi sham and edim zayim have a tzad chamor. They have something strict about them, and therefore don't learn it to other cases which don't have these stringencies. But l'chura, it goes against the whole mechanics of tzad hashava. The whole mechanics of tzad hashava is that when you're learning from two things together, it doesn't matter whether each one of those two has a certain chumrah, as long as lo yir'i zek yir'i zeh v'lo yir'i zek yir'i zeh, as long as each one is a different type of chumrah. Then that proves to me that it's not the particular chumrah which causes the din, and therefore you can learn from it. So in this situation, Edim Zayim has a chumrah of Einam Srichin Hasra, doesn't need Hasra. Moitzi Sham has a chumrah of Loika Mishalim. So you're going to tell me just a second, Ma'alat Tzad HaShavasham, both Edim Zayim and Moitzi Sham have some sort of stringency. So what? It's not the same stringency. Each one doesn't have the other stringency, right? And that's the whole idea of Tzad HaShavah, that because the chumrah that's involved is different one from the other, so therefore, you can learn from it. But nevertheless, this is what the Gemara asks, at least according to Rashi. Tosfos, if I remember correctly, has a different pshat in Tzad Chamor. But upon him, this is what the Gemara. So for the Gemara, Tzad Hashava and Shekein Yesh Ben Tzad Chamor. The Chura, the Tzad Hashava, meaning the common denominator between Moitzi Shamra and Edim Zayimim, is that they have some sort of stringency which other dinim don't have. In the case of Moitzi Shamra, it's the chumrah of Loika Mishalim. In the case of Edim Zayim, it's the chumrah of Ein Srichin Hasra. So therefore, you can't learn to other cases which don't have these stringency. The Gemara answers Rabbi Yehuda Tzad Chamor Loi Pareh, which Gemara is basically saying that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Tzad Chamor Loi Pareh, according to the way Rashi explains, is that the fact that it has a Tzad Chamor, some sort of chumrah about it, that doesn't mean that you can't learn from it. You know, because the chumrah of one is not like the other, is not like the other chumrah. Okay, so let's pause over here and let's do the Rashis. This is basically the end of the next piece, which is this middle piece over here, which we've kind of gone on to a side topic of why lav shein by Maisa is loikin alav according to Rabbi Yehuda, and we said you learn it from combination of Moitzi Shemer and Edom Zayim. That's the right. So let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Iked the Masni law, the final wide line. Iked the Masni law lahad ola. Those who learn this of ola, loymar she'ein loikin alav. Right. This is going on the brayso which says alav anitik lasei doesn't get malchus. Sha'asei amo achrov. Rashi gives a little bit of a biur of why lava nitik lasei. It's not the xeris hakos of the lava nitik lasei doesn't get malchus. Rather, it's a svar. Lav she'ein loymar she'ein loikin alav sha'asei amo la'achrov kakanose v'kaparos alav erisalav. Because what the Torah is essentially saying by saying, don't do something, but do this instead. If you do transgress, right? Don't steal, but if you do steal, give back the money. Don't leave nicer, but if you do, then burn it. What the pasuk essentially is saying is shahaseya amu akrav, the asay, the positive mitzvah, which is said afterwards, takanose the kaparasi, is the way of fixing up the lamb. It's not just the way of fixing up the lamb, it's the kaparasi, it's also the kapara, the atonement, al averis halav, and therefore there's no malchus. Loimin Hashem was that says Rabbi Kiva, that no, I argue. It's not the reason why Noiser doesn't get malchus because it's a lav and it's passé, but rather somebody who leaves over the carbon, the reason why he doesn't get malchus is because it's a lav shein ben ma'aser. Says Rashi, ein tam ze ikar. This is not the main reason. I'm going to read it the way I have Rashi in front of me. Ein, there's different size. Ein tam ze ikar. The lav shenitik lasei ein loiknala. The reason, this is not the main reason because lav shenitik lasei ein loiknala. In other words, he's admitting that lav shenitik lasei is taka, not malchus, but that's not the reason by Noiser. Why somebody leaves over carbon doesn't get malchus? Because it's a lav shein b'ma'aser. And then the Gemara says, where does Rabbi Yehuda get this idea? Lav shein b'ma'aser gets malchus. So the Gemara says, first the Gemara says we learn from Moitzi Shemer, and then the Gemara says Moitzi Shemer alone doesn't work because Moitzi Shemer is a chumrah of loikum mishalim, and therefore can't learn from there to other places. So the Gemara says we learn from Edom Zayim. Gamam Edom Zayim says Rashi, Ma Edom Zayim lav shein b'ma'aser v'loikin. Rashi explains, like I already said when I was explaining the Gemara, it's not every Eid Zayim, but rather Eidim Zayim in Loikin al Diburim the Eidim ben Grusha ben Chametz. Rabbi Taka says that every Eid Zayim gets malchus, but we're going the shit of the Chachamim. But even the Chachamim agree that Eidim Zayim in Loikin al Diburim the Eidim ben Grusha ben Chametz in the case of when they try to make somebody a chalal, or for that matter when they try to make someone galus, and according to some shittas, even in other cases as well, when they don't get kashazam. So such as the Eidei Koifer and the Eidei Eved Ivri. Yeah, and they try anyway. So, but either way, definitely in the case of Eidei Ben Grush and Eidei Galus, there is malchus. So we see from there the Lav Shem Ma'aser gets malchus. So the Gemara straight away responds, no, there's no raya from Edom Zayim. Edom Zayim ain't Srichin Asra. Edom Zayim has a special kiddush if you don't need Asra. Biksubas Amrin on time, but the Gemara explains Biksubas, the Elon Aris, Nasri Bo Amos, when are you going to give them Asra? B'chulu. All other types of oinshin need hasra, and therefore one can't learn from Edom Zayim. Tzad chamor loipar. Finally, the Gemara says that even though Moitzi Shemer and Edom Zayim both have a tzad chamor, they have some sort of chumrah about them. That doesn't preclude us. It doesn't stop us from learning from those two to the case of other lav shein b'ma'aser, because tzad chamor loipar. Hoil the chumrah shel zeh ein chumrah shel zeh. Since the chumrah Moitzi Shemer is not like the chumrah of Edom Zayim and vice versa, ain't tam malchus tali. But therefore, it makes sense to say that the reason of malchus isn't tali in the chumrah because the raya that the other one doesn't have that chumrah and still gets malchus. Okay, that really ends the next, I guess, the second piece of this amud, so to speak, of the Gemara. The Mishnah, you have the first kata in the Gemara, which is explaining why Remeah holds that you get both malchus and mammon, and then you have a side topic to explain the shit of Rabbi Yehuda lav shein b'ma'aser loikin olav. And now we go to the topic of why the Rabbanon, what's loisana all about. In other words, l'chura, if you're not giving malchus for loisana, then why do you need a pasuk of loisana? Rabbanon hay loisana v'recha eight shakim my darshan. This loisan of recha eight shakim my darshan. What do they learn out of it? If you're not getting malchus for it, then my darshan. What do they garish it for? What do they use it for? So the Gemara answers, Pasha. Hahumi boile lazhara. You need that for lazhara. What's Pasha pshat? Hahumi boile lazhara is very simple. Yes, an Eid Zayim gets punished by Sisim lekashazam and asas la'achir, but there's a rule: ain oinshin anim kein maskirin. Right? You can't have the Torah. The Torah can't just say if you murder, you chayiv misa. That wouldn't be good enough. Wouldn't be good enough. It's implied that you're not allowed to murder. It's a terrible thing, right? No, it doesn't work. And the Torah always has to also say, don't do it. Also has to somewhere say you're not allowed to do it. So it's just the tells me the punishment of Eidim Zayim, but you need another passage to say you're not allowed to do it. And that's the loisan of Reich Eichak. That's needed for Azhara of Eidim Zayim. Remea, just a second. Remea Azhara Eidim Zayim Minala. According to Remea, where does he get the Azhara for Eidim Zayim from? If he's using loisana to say that you get Malchus, so you need another pasuk to say that you're not allowed to do it. So where's the Azhara for Eidim Zayim? Right? If loisana is telling me that you get Malchus, so where's the Azhara for Eidim Zayim? Where's the third primary place where it says you're not allowed to do it? Pasuk says by Eidim Zayim when they punished the Eidim Zayim. So I'm just going to look at the pasuk a second. Over here at the side. Yeah. When you punish Eidim Zayim, everyone else sees and they hear. They don't do it. So it's clear they're not allowed to do it. And this is in the parish of Eidim Zayim, and we say you're not allowed. Everyone listens and they don't continue to do these things. They learn, in other words, from the punishment of Eidim Zayim. They learn that they're not allowed. They learn the lesson. They see other people being punished to say we're not going to do it. So that ultimately that's the Torah saying not to do it. The Rabbanon, and what about the Rabbanon? In other words, if they use loisana for that hara, what's this pasuk coming to say? My answer is this is coming to tell me a different thing, not that's hara, not the din that you're not allowed to testify falsely, but rather lahachraza, that at the time when Bezdin punishes the Eidim Zayim, they announce that Klein is being nerag, is being killed because he's an Eid Zayim. In other words, not every time that you punish somebody, you do hachraza, you announce and tell everybody why he's being killed. But in this case, because the Torah says they see that everyone else has to hear and become afraid and not continue to euros to see. The lo yosifu, sorry, not afraid. They hear and they see the lo yosifu and they don't continue to do that avera. So that teaches me that Bezin has to let everyone know what's going on. They have to announce that the person's getting killed. So Rameh, what's Rameh? Where does he learn hachraza from? Hachraza maybe Yishmu Virona. Rameh, in other words, splits the pasuk into two. And Yishmu Virol tells me that everyone has to hear and see. That's the hachraza. The lo yusifu oid is the azhara, is where the Torah is telling me now. Okay, let's see Rashi. Azhara leidim zayim, the second to last Rashi on Tafal Amud is Azhara leidim zayim lo bedin hazama. In order to be able to give them the punishment of din hazama, kash hazama, you need an azhara. You need to tell me that you're not allowed to do it. It's not there for the punishment of Malchus, according to Rabbi. You can't give them an einish of kash hazama, right? Of doing tit for tat of how they plotted, unless you warn them. And this is the Azhara. This is the Torah telling you you're not allowed to do it in the parish of Eidim Zayim. And that's the Shitta of the Rabbanon. Sorry, that's the Shitta of Remeah. The Rabbanon say that no, that's Azhara is from Leisana. What's Vanishar Mishmu really see for last? This passage tells you that everyone hears and they're not going to behave that way. Hahumi boile lachraza, says Rashi lachraza. Damrina b'sanhedim. We say in Sanhedim beinan anachnakim. That peitasam adalf in Perak Elohin anachnakim. Arba srichin as achraza. The four situations, four people who need. There's four instances in which you announce to everybody that they're getting punished for such and such a reason. And Rashi explains la'achash and ensha bebezdin. After they get punished, srichin bezdin lahachris. They have to make an announcement. Kach v'kach nerag. Ploini bebezdin shalabeir. Ploini is kitei l'ardei sesashem. You announce that so and so was killed for such and such an avera in order to get the people listening afraid. That is the shita of the Rabban. Rameh says no, we split the pasuk into me. Vishma v'yiro nafka v'azhar lo yisif v'azhar taka from lo yisif. Okay, we'll stop over here. I apologize. There's no second shiur. But as Hashem, hopefully next week, all being well, we'll be back in person.